Well, to tell us a little bit more about South Africa's participation at the 52nd regular session of the Human Rights Council, I'm now joined by the permanent representative of South Africa to the United Nations office in Geneva, Ambassador Mxolisi Nkosi. Ambassador, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Well, thanks very much for having me, Peter.
Ambassador, tell us about the importance of South Africa's election back to the HRC and our participation there at the 52nd session.
Well, indeed, we are extremely honored to be back in the UN Human Rights Council. As you are aware, we were voted by an overwhelming majority of member states of the United Nations organization to be a member of the UN Human Rights Council for the period 2023 to 2025. And indeed, we are extremely grateful for this very resounding mandate that we've received. Of all the candidates that had put up their candidature for the UN Human Rights Council, South Africa received most of the votes. And indeed, we are honored by this. And we plan to fulfill this mandate by being true to our credentials as a lodestar and a champion of human rights, to contribute to the promotion and protection of human rights globally.
All right, tell us a little bit about what South Africa's statement is going to be at this session. What are you putting forward?
Well, Deputy Minister Mashigo Dlamini, the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, will address the Human Rights Council high-level segment on Thursday, the 2nd of March. And indeed, in that statement, she will recall the importance of the UN Declaration on Human Rights, whose 75th anniversary we mark this year. She will also recall the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, whose 30th anniversary will also mark this year. And indeed, she will also highlight the important milestones that South Africa has achieved in terms of the promotion and protection of human rights as encapsulated in its constitution, in its Bill of Rights, and also as finding practical expression through institutions such as the South African Human Rights Commission. She will also talk to the importance of the Human Rights Council to ensure the promotion of all rights. All human rights are indivisible, they are interrelated, and they are interdependent. And we need to ensure that civil, political rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights are all on the same footing, and they are promoted fairly and in a just manner.
All right, let's talk about the larger agenda of the Human Rights Council. What are the big issues at the table this session?
Well, as you have indicated in your clip opening this interview, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, as well as the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Antonio Guterres, they did an overview of the global situation with regards to human rights. And they noted that indeed there is a deterioration of human rights, particularly coming on the back of the past 2.5 years, where we've experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, with its attendant restrictions on the rights and civil liberties of people. And indeed, the High Commissioner also highlighted a number of instances of violations, including situations in countries like Afghanistan, situations in Sri Lanka, situations in the occupied Palestinian territory, etc.
I wonder, South Africa sometimes takes a neutral position on issues. How do you navigate on a platform such as this, where there are human rights abuses, in some countries in Africa, and even on international stage. I believe there was a walkout there in Geneva when the Iranian representative got up to speak. So that a council such as yours is not always in agreement, and that we know for sure, some human rights abuses taking place across our continent. How does South Africa sit at the table and find a way to make sense of all of this?
Well, we assess every situation based on its merits, and we use the criteria set by the Human Rights Council, but also we factor in our own national position and national interests, national values as a country as guided by our constitution. So we take into consideration a whole range of factors in order to arrive at a determination as to how we posture as a country in particular situations. So we will be, over the next 5 weeks, receiving reports on specific situations, as well as broadly thematic global situations. And we will view each country or specific situation on the basis of using the lenses of our own values, our own constitution, our own Bill of Rights, and also assessing in terms of the impact that that situation has, both in terms of the country concerned, as well as its impact in the region and globally.
All right, so imagine I'm a citizen in a country in Africa. My rights are being abused. The ruling party is doing things like, I don't know, unnecessarily jailing opposition figures, police beating citizens, that kind of thing. And they look to you in Geneva and say, look, we're in pain. What can you do for them other than discuss and maybe issue a note?
Well, Peter, as you know, the Human Rights Council has got special procedures through which allegations of human rights violations are reported. So there are independent expert mechanisms that are established based on the assessment of allegations and reports received from citizens, from groupings, etc. And these then are subjected to an assessment based on a criteria set by these special mechanisms. And if indeed there is a case that a specific country has to answer to, then a decision is taken to appoint an independent expert, for example, to look into that situation. The independent expert then would undertake a visit to the country concerned, engage all the role players and compile a report, which will then be presented to the council for consideration. So that is just in a nutshell how the procedure works in terms of dealing with allegations of violations of human rights.
All right, we've talked about the agenda in broad terms. We've talked about what South Africa is going to say. What would you like to see coming out of the session, particularly from a South African perspective? What will success look like for us in this 50-second session?
Well, from our perspective, and for the sake of the viewers, South Africa is the elite country on the anti-racism agenda. So for this specific session, we've got two key objectives, and that is the renewal of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the anti-racism agenda. 1, and 2 is the renewal of the mandate of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the anti-racism agenda, focusing specifically on the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, which was the outcome document of the World Conference Against Racism that we hosted in Durban in 2001. So these are the very two concrete outcomes that we're looking forward to in this session. And indeed, so far, we are confident that there will be consensus in terms of the adoption of a resolution to extend the mandate of these two particular mechanisms that are focused on the anti-racism agenda. Over and above that, South Africa is also chairing the Intergovernmental Working Group on private military and security companies, which seeks to develop an international norm and standard that would hold private military and security companies to account for any egregious human rights violations. We're also part of a grouping of countries that are championing a similar instrument that is focusing on multinational companies. And indeed, beyond that, we're also going to be championing issues around women's rights, children's rights, issues of gender-based violence, issues of the rights of people with disabilities, etc. These are the major issues that are going to inform our agenda as we assume the seat in the UN Human Rights Council.
All right. Before a session like this, is there some caucusing that you do with other African states to bring a position from the continent? Because it is a privilege that you have, South Africa, to be sitting at this council.
Indeed, we are constituted in various groupings. So we have the Africa group, which is our group. We belong to that group. And indeed, we play an active role in that group. There are various other groups. Western European countries also have got their own group. Latin American countries are also constituted in their group. Pacific Asian countries are constituted in their group, and so on. So there are indeed various groupings, and we try as much as possible to develop common positions as groups, because indeed, if we speak with one voice as a group, then the impact and the possibility of success in terms of what we're proposing as norms and standards is far more possible.
Ambassador, that's where we'll leave it for tonight. Perhaps we can catch up with you again once this session's done, but thanks so much indeed for your thoughts tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that's the permanent representative of South Africa to the United Nations office in Geneva, Ambassador Mxolisi Nkosi, speaking to us about the 52nd session of the Human Rights Council currently underway in Geneva. South Africa will be presenting its statement on Thursday, and we'll keep a track of that for you. And that's going to be delivered by the Deputy Minister in the Ministry of International Relations and Cooperation.